हज़रत मसीह मऊद अलैहिस्सलाम की बेइज्जत के बाद इस्लाम की तारीख़ ने हर मैदान में एक नया बाब खोलना था। सो कुदरत सानिया का 5वां दौर भी अल्लाह ताला के वादों के मुताबिक एक नया बाब है।
हुआ मैं तेरे फजलों का मुनादी, फसुब्हानल्लज़ी यख़ज़ल्लादी। हुआ मैं तेरे फजलों का मुनादी, फसुब्हानल्लज़ी यख़ज़ल्लादी। हुआ मैं तेरे फजलों का मुनादी, फसुब्हानल्लज़ी यख़ज़ल्लादी।
الخلافة الأحمدية هو اسم المؤسسة التي تنبأ بتأسيسها النبي الكريم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، والتي تم إنشاؤها بنجاح بتأييد من الله سبحانه وتعالى، وتعتبر 105 سنوات الماضية خير شاهد على هذا. يشهد التاريخ أنه كلما توفي خليفة للمسلمين في الماضي كانت وفاته تتسبب في انقلاب حالتهم من الأمن والسلام إلى حالة من الخوف، ثم يبدل الله سبحانه وتعالى حالتهم مرة أخرى إلى السلام بطريقة جميلة جدا ومنظمة مع ظهور الخليفة الجديد. وقد واجهت الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية نوعا مماثلا من الامتحان في نيسان من عام 2003 عندما توفي حضرة خليفة المسيح الرابع، وفي مساء يوم 22 من أبريل بدل الله سبحانه وتعالى حالة المؤمنين إلى الأمن والسلام مرة أخرى، وساد الجماعة شعورا بالسلام، ومن حينها كل يوم يمر يجلب معه السلام والأمن إلى قلوبهم. وكل يوم يمر في زمن الخلافة الخامسة تظهر عظمة المسيح الموعود عليه السلام، وبالتالي عظمة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. هذه القصة ليست قصة بضعة أيام، فهي تمتد على فترة 10 سنوات. إنها قصة 10 سنوات المباركة الأولى من الخلافة الخامسة. في الفترة الأولى من الخلافة الخامسة واجه الإسلام العديد من التحديات التي يمكن تسميتها تحديات العصر الحديث، وسواء أكانت مؤامرة مخططا لها أو مسار تاريخي لا مفر منه، فالحقيقة أن الإسلام قد واجه العديد من الصعوبات في ذلك الوقت.
When Hazrat Khalifatul Masih was elected, divinely elected, on the 22nd of April 2003, he came into perhaps the most anti-Islamic environment that we've seen in modern history. Although there'd been anti-Muslim sentiment since perhaps the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the events of 9/11 really crystallized everybody's mind, focusing them on Islam's role within society. That led to tremendous challenges for Hazrat Khalifatul Masih. On the one hand, he had a media that was incessantly attacking Islam and putting the responsibility for terrorism at the feet of Islam and all Muslims. On the other hand, you had politicians that were having to respond to the wide media clamour, and the public that was also being affected by these two very important influences.
لقد قدم للعالم صورة جاهزة من الإسلام رسمت من قبل بعض ما يسمى بالمسلمين، ولكن تم استغلال هذه الصورة من قبل وسائل الإعلام، وأصبح الإسلام مرادفاً للإرهاب، وأصبح مصطلح التطرف الإسلامي يستخدم بكثرة في الصحافة ووسائل الإعلام، كان كما لو أنه اسم آخر للإسلام.
When I look back at some of the reports on fundamentalism, mentions of the word fundamentalism in the Telegraph newspaper, for instance, long before 2003, over a 2.5-year period, I found that fundamentalism was mentioned 194 times. In that same 2.5-year period, and in those mentions of fundamentalism, 142 times Islamic was mentioned in conjunction with that, which is a little less than 75%. This one was on the 17th of September 2001 in the Telegraph, and one extract of this particular article says, "But unlike Islam, Christianity does not justify the use of all forms of violence. Islam does." And in another article a year later, in September 2002, it was written, "There was a brief surge of media interest last year in Afghanistan, the benighted country that had harboured the evildoers, and in Islam, the yucky religion that had started the whole thing." So the consequence of media reporting about Islam in this way was that the public was understandably affected.
وفي هذا الوقت بدأ الهجوم من كل الجهات، وكلما بدأ هجوم كان إمام هذه الجماعة المتواضعة والغير معروفة نسبيا يقف ويتخذ موقفا ثابتا وعدته المعروفة والحكمة.
On September 12th, 2006, Pope Benedict XVI, who has since resigned from his papacy, delivered a lecture at a top university in Germany. And this lecture sparked quite a bit of controversy. In it, he cited a fairly old reference to a dialogue between the emperor from Byzantine, Manuel Peleologos, and a Persian individual. And in that discussion, this Byzantine emperor says, "Show me something that's new about Muhammad, anything new about him, and there you will find only material that is evil and inhumane." For example, he forced others to convert through the sword. And the Pope cited this reference as an example of why reason should be coupled with faith. But it was a rather careless and offensive representation of Islamic doctrine. The implications of what he said sparked outrage throughout the Islamic world. Immediately after that address in Germany, just a few days after September 12th, September 13th, September 14th, there was considerable widespread protest among Muslims all over the world. Some of those protests got rather ugly, and other scholars of Islam actually chose to respond to the Pope. Some of them didn't quite understand how to respond to the Pope and completely misrepresented what the Pope actually said and didn't understand the references the Pope was making to the Byzantine emperor. And so you saw a clumsy response from a number of Islamic scholars seeking to reprimand the Pope for bringing out really ugly and perverted understandings of Islam. But then 3 days later, Hazrat Amir المؤمينين, Hazrat الخليفة المسيح الخامس, أيده العزيز, delivered a Friday sermon from London's Batul Fatu Mosque, in which he squarely addressed the Pope's remarks in Germany. And his response and his understanding of what the Pope said was much more sophisticated and nuanced than any other Muslim leader or thinker.
आज अगर ये लोग अपनी इमारत और ताकत के घमंड में इस्लाम और हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम पर हमले कर रहे हैं तो हमारी दुआओं के तीरों से इंशाअल्लाह ताला इनके घमंड टूटेंगे। बस उस खुदा को पुकारें जो कायनात का खुदा है, जो रब्बिल आलमीन है, जो हज़रत मोहम्मद मुस्तफ़ा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का खुदा है, ताकि जल्द तर इस वाहिद-उल-ला शरीक खुदा की हुकूमत दुनिया में कायम हो जाए। मुसलमान मुल्कों को भी सोचना चाहिए कि अपने फ़िरोई इख्तिलाफ़ात जो हैं उनको ख़त्म करें, आपस की लड़ाइयों और दुश्मनियों को ख़त्म करें, एक होकर हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के नाम को बुलंद करने की कोशिश करें और ऐसे अमल से बाज आ जाएं जिनसे गैरों को उन पर उंगली उठाने की ज़रूरत हो। अल्लाह ताला इनकी मदद करे.
في 30 من سبتمبر 2005 نشرت صحيفة دنماركية الرسوم الكاريكاتورية الاثني عشر المسيئة للنبي الكريم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ثم حذت حذوها العديد من الصحف الغربية الأخرى. وكان هذا الحادث مصيريا ومثيرا للجدل، لأن عددا كبيرا من الناس لقوا حتفهم بعد نشر هذه الرسوم الكاريكاتورية. ففي البداية احتجت الجماعات الإسلامية في الدنمارك ضد ذلك، ولكن ما إن مضى بضعة أسابيع حتى ضربت موجة من أعمال الشغب والاحتجاجات العنيفة أجزاء كثيرا من العالم.
The caricatures were but one example of using the media and other tools, freedom of expression, in order to unfairly and unreasonably and unpleasantly caricature Islam and the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in a negative light. Around the time Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih was divinely elected, Geert Wilders, who was a right-wing politician and member of the VVD party in the Netherlands, engaged in a campaign to propagate what he called a jihad against Muslims and imams and mosques. He also issued a 10-point plan which was designed to ensure that Turkey would not be part of the European Union because it was a Muslim country. Regrettably, Muslims in the Netherlands fell very much into his anti-Muslim trap. And when the caricatures were published in Danish cartoons, caricatures which were again very unpleasant about the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and also in French newspapers. Unfortunately, Muslims did not respond in the right way, and those groups outside of the Ahmadi-Muslim Jamaat regrettably engaged in all sorts of acts which fell right into the hands of the extremists and created exactly the perception of Islam that these extremists wanted to create.
رأى حضرة خليفة المسيح الخامس أن الأمر قد آذى مشاعر المسلمين، ولكنه بيّن أيضاً أن ردة فعل الأغلبية الكبيرة من المسلمين كانت عنيفة بالمقابل. وهكذا فقد وقف إمام الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية ليرد بطريقة معتدلة جداً.
Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih dealt with this point very decisively, and characteristic of his leadership throughout the course of this 10 years, hit the nail right on the head.
मुसलमानों के बाद जो लीडर हैं उनके गलत रद्द अमल से इन लोगों को फिर इस्लाम को बदनाम करने का मौका मिल जाता है. यही चीज़ें हैं जिनसे फिर ये लोग बाद सियासी फ़ायदे भी उठाते हैं. लेकिन जैसा कि हम सब जानते हैं कि हमारा रद्द अमल कभी हड़तालों की सूरत में नहीं होता और ना आगे लगाने की सूरत में होता है, और ना ही हड़तालें और तोड़ फोड़ और झंडे जलाना इसका इलाज है.
بمناسبة الذكرى التاسعة لأحداث 11 من سبتمبر، قام قس ذي أتباع قلائل في أمريكا بحرق نسخ من القرآن الكريم في محاولة لإثارة مشاعر المسلمين. فشهد العالم مرة أخرى نفس ردة الفعل السابقة من قبل الأتباع الحقيقيين للنبي الكريم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Regrettably, Muslims reacted to this in precisely the way that they shouldn't have, and they did exactly what Pastor Terry Jones wanted them to do, which was to engage in violent conduct so that the world would characterize Islam as being a belligerent, violent and unpleasant religion. They engaged in violent demonstrations and again destruction of property and other behaviour which was not in keeping with the true teachings and spirit of Islam. In contrast, Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih spoke extensively about this topic, and although Ahmadi Muslims were very upset by the attempt to burn the Holy Quran and the attack on Islam and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They didn't engage in violent conduct at all. In fact, in keeping with the Khalifatul Masih's guidance, they responded in a way that was peaceful, engaging the rhetoric of Pastor Terry Jones and encouraging people to understand the true spirit of Islam. In fact, thousands and thousands of copies of the Holy Quran were distributed across the world free of charge.
ये बड़ी बदकिस्मती है कि आज मुसलमानों के अमल ही हैं जो मुखालिफीन इस्लाम को ये मौका दे रहे हैं कि वो कुरान करीम पर एतराज़ करें, इसकी तालीम पर एतराज़ करें। आजकल कुरान करीम और इस्लामी तालीम को बदनाम करने की एक मज़मूम कोशिश अमेरिका के एक चर्च की तरफ से हो रही है, जिसमें एक ज़ालिमाना काम जो उन्होंने अपना प्रोग्राम बनाया है कि 11 सितंबर को कुरान करीम को जलाने का भी है, जिसे मीडिया ने हर जगह बयान किया है। जो एतराज़ात किए हैं इस चर्च ने, 10 एतराज़ात हैं, इंतहाई लग़्व और बोध एतराज़ात। बल्कि एतराज़ करने हों तो हम बाइबल पर भी बहुत सारे एतराज़ कर सकते हैं, लेकिन हमारा ये काम नहीं है कि फ़साद पैदा करें। हाँ, इल्मी बहस है और एतराज़ का हक़ हर एक को हासिल है। वो इल्मी बहस हम करते हैं।
في صيف عام 2012 أثير جدل كبير حول فيلم نشر على يوتيوب بعنوان براءة المسلمين، وكان الغرض من نشره إظهار الإسلام بصورة سلبية جدا ولإهانة اسم النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
A YouTube film clip, a trailer for a movie called Innocence of Muslims, had spread like wildfire throughout the world. The complete film was really not to be found, but this trailer spread on YouTube all over Middle Eastern countries, particularly in Egypt, and it coincided with a lot of protests that were being conducted as part of the Arab Spring. In this controversy, Islam was painted in a very negative light. And immediately we saw, as we did in prior protests with respect to the caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even with Pope Benedict XVI's comments, violent protests around the Middle East and South Asia, and indeed the world over. And some of these protests got very ugly, and many cars were vandalized, many homes were vandalized, and people were hurt and even killed over the controversy around the YouTube film clip. At this time, in the summer, August and September of 2012, there were a number of Muslim leaders who responded to this YouTube clip. Again, they sanctioned this type of violent reaction, that this filmmaker should be put to death, that this film should be stopped immediately, that the controversy surrounding the filmmaker should be immediately denounced by the whole world, and there was quite a bit of agitation. Hazrat Amir al-Mu'minin, the global leader of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, again, in response to a controversy around Islam, delivered what has become the most intellectually balanced and profound response to this type of attack against Islam.
इस्लामी ममालिक और उम्मत मुस्लिमा को बहुत दुआ में याद रखें। ये ऐसे जाल में फंस रहे हैं और फंसते चले जा रहे हैं जो अपने लालचों की वजह से भी, ख़ुदगर्ज़ाना मफादात की वजह से भी और इस्लाम मुखालिफ क़ुव्वतों की वजह से भी मुसलमान उम्मा को हर लिहाज से बेदस्तपा कर रहा है और इनको समझ नहीं आ रही कि इनके साथ क्या हो रहा है। जानबूझकर फसादात के मौके पैदा किए जाते हैं, जिससे मुसलमान बजाय एक सही रद्दअमल दिखाने के गलत रद्दअमल दिखाकर अपने ऊपर और मसाइब से हेड़ रहे हैं। अल्लाह ताला इनको हर तरह से महफूज रखे, बहुत ज़्यादा दुआ करें। अल्लाह ताला मुस्लिम उम्मा को भी अक्ल दे कि ये भी उस तालीम के मुताबिक अमल करने वाले हों जो अल्लाह और उसके रसूल ने हमें बताई है।
في هذه الحقبة المباركة من الخلافة الخامسة اشتعل العالم بسلسلة من الأزمات متعددة الأبعاد. يدعي الإسلام أنه يحمل الحلول لجميع هذه المشاكل. لم يكن العالم في الماضي مستعدا للالتفات إلى حلول الإسلام، لأن العالم ببساطة كان قانعا بأنظمته الخاصة. بدأ العالم الآن يدرك أن الإسلام يقدم حلولا لجميع المشاكل الدنيوية، وتحمل الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية شيئا يميزها عن غيرها.
The present day world is ridden with conflicts and strifes, political and economic interests conflicting with each other. Rust of materialism has eaten into the soul and fiber of human nature. In this age, Khalifatul Masih, the worldwide spiritual leader of the Ahmadi community, is a spiritual leader. He is a man of God. When he speaks out of his sincere concern, not for this country or this nation or that nation, or this interest or that interest. He speaks with a genuine concern of the humanity and the mankind at large. And he addresses the issues and presents his solutions in the light of the divine teachings which he gathers from Quran and Sunnah. And in that way, when he addresses the world leaders, his words fall soft on the ears. He is a soft-spoken man. The words fall soft in the ears, but penetrate deep into the minds of the people and set them thinking. So when he speaks, he is heard. The word of the Khalifatul Masih is heard as the voice of a man of God, and it is heeded too. Whether the world will heed to them and act upon them is a different question, but he is heard. And we have seen this over a period of time.
I will, God willing, always continue to carry out my task and my responsibilities of promoting peace, tolerance, justice, and compassion to the corners of the world. I will continue to tell all people that in order to be relieved of the pain and suffering that we face today, we must adopt true justice and equality.
لا يمكن للزمن أن يساعد، ولكن أصغي جيدا لهذا النداء. في الأوقات العصيبة لهذه الأيام، هذا هو الصوت الوحيد الهادئ، وفي ظلام العالم هو شعاع النور الوحيد. إنه الحصن الوحيد المتبقي لحماية البشرية، وقد بدأ العالم الآن يدرك ذلك.
For the past 5 or 6 years, I have warned all of those within my reach about the deteriorating state of the world. I have repeatedly said that the worsening financial and political climate is leading the world towards the most horrific destruction. It is quite possible and even likely that the path the world is treading will culminate in a terrifying world war. If a world war breaks out, then the Western world will also be deeply affected by its far-reaching and devastating consequences. Let us save ourselves from such destruction. Let us save our future generation from the miserable and devastating consequences of war. Obviously, the most horrific type of war would be an atomic war, and certainly the way the world is heading, there is a real risk of a nuclear war breaking out. We should strive for the entire world to unite together. In terms of currency, the world should be united. In terms of free business and trade, the world should be united. And in terms of freedom of movement and immigration, cohesive and practical policies should be developed so that the world can become united. No one can ever claim that in any society, country, or even the entire world, there can be disorder or a lack of peace where justice and fair dealing exists. Islam teaches that peace can only be established by helping both the oppressed and oppressor in a manner that is completely impartial, free from vested interests, and devoid of all enmity. Peace is made by giving all parties an equal platform and playing field. We, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, always endeavor to convey these true teachings to as wide an audience as we can. I would request all of you to also make efforts to raise awareness within your own circles of influence about these issues so that long-lasting peace can be developed in all parts of the world.
It is very good to meet a leading person and see the influence he has all over the world, and also his passion for peace and religious freedom is very good. And he was so well prepared, so he knows a lot about Norway and our hometown.
His Holiness has a huge breadth of knowledge about, obviously, the Ahmadiyya community, about what is going on internationally. I just saw him talk to a representative from the Canadian government, and he seemed on top of what was happening in Canada, in all sorts of countries, talking about the faith in Africa. So he's a man of great knowledge.
Well, I think in any society where there are incidences of violence, of extremism, of prejudice, of hatred, a message of love, a message of peace, and a message not just of words but of action, also showing what those values mean in practice, doing good works, making commitments to our community both here and in other parts of the world. His Excellency was telling me about the exceptional work of the Ahmadiyya community of creating model villages in Ghana, for instance, where he himself worked many years ago. I think is a very powerful antidote to the forces of hatred, division and violence.
Wherever Ahmadis go, they will love their countries like all true citizens should, and will spend their lives actively seeking the betterment and progress of their nation. It is Islam that teaches us to live our lives in this way. And indeed, it does not just gently advocate this, but actually commands us to be absolutely loyal and devoted to our country of residence. Allah has said in the Quran that He bestows His grace and blessings on all of the worlds. He does not favor any nation or region. He does not desire peace for just a limited few. Rather, He wants to see the entire world filled with peace, harmony, and compassion. In the sight of Allah, all of His creation is equal and the same.
النقطة المشرقة الأخرى في زمن الخلافة الخامسة هو الجهد المبذول لإحياء مجد الإسلام، فقد تم بناء المساجد على نطاق واسع في جميع أنحاء العالم. لقد تشرفت الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية بافتتاح أول مسجد في إسبانيا بعد 700 عام، وذلك في عهد الخلافة الرابعة. وقد أوعز حضرة خليفة المسيح الخامس إلى أبناء الجماعة في إسبانيا عند أول زيارة له إليها أن عليهم بذل قصارى جهدهم لفتح العديد من المساجد في إسبانيا حتى يتسنى لمجد الإسلام الذي ساد يوما على هذه الأرض أن يعود مرة أخرى.
एक वक्त आएगा कि बड़ी बड़ी अजीम शान और मस्जिदें भी जमात अहमदिया को बनाने की यहाँ इस मुल्क में तौफीक मिलेगी, लेकिन ये जो दुआओं के साथ आजिज़ाना इब्तिदा हुई है, इसको तारीख़ अहमदियत कभी नहीं भुला सकेगी। बस कोशिश करें हर अहमदी मर्द और औरत जो यहाँ रहता है कोशिश करे کہ احمدیت کی تبلیغ کے کام کو سنجیدگی سے لے اور سنجیدگی سے انجام دے۔ برکت تو اللہ تعالیٰ نے ڈالنی ہے، نیک نیتی سے کیے گئے کام اور دعاؤں کو اللہ تعالیٰ ضرور پھل لگاتا ہے۔
وقد بني أحد هذه المساجد في فالنسيا وافتتحه حضرة خليفة المسيح بنفسه.
الحمدللہ آج ہمیں اسپین میں دوسری احمدیہ مسجد بنانے کی توفیق مل رہی ہے۔ جماعت احمدیہ مسلمہ کو یہ دوسری مسجد بنانے کی توفیق مل رہی ہے۔ تقریباً 7 سال پہلے میں نے مسجد بشارت حیدرآباد میں مزید مساجد بنانے کی اہمیت پر زور دیا تھا، اور اس وقت یہ فیصلہ ہوا تھا کہ ویلنسیا میں مسجد کی تعمیر کی جائے۔
قام أمير المؤمنين في هذه الجولة بلقاء مختلف الشخصيات المحلية في فالنسيا، كما عقد عشاء استقبال حضره كبار الشخصيات الذين عبروا عن مشاعرهم تجاه الجماعة، وألقى حضرة أمير المؤمنين الخطاب الرئيس في ذلك الحفل. وقد تأثر كثيرا الساسة والسكان الأصليين على السواء، وفوجئوا برؤية هذه الصورة الجميلة
I got to
للإسلام.
know the community many years ago through the first missionary that came to Spain. He explained to me about the suffering he endured and the time he spent in jail, and so today I am bearing witness to the honor of seeing your Khalifa. It was since then that I heard the slogan, "Love for all, hatred for none," and I have been inspired by this every day. I believe that it was a very good speech because the idea of living peacefully with each other in the current situation is very important. It is something that needs to be transmitted, and it's something that should be made known to the media and press, not the idea that certain minorities show off division.
Although I am a Christian, I feel great acquaintance with what His Holiness has said tonight, because even though we have a different religion, there are actually more things that unite us rather than separate us. And I have felt that His Holiness is a very open person, since even I was able to greet him.
كما قام حضرته بجولة أخرى هامة إلى لوس أنجلوس وكاليفورنيا، وألقى من هناك خطبة جمعة تاريخية تحدث فيها عن زيارته لإسبانيا، وحث أبناء الجماعة هناك على نشر رسالة الإسلام الجميلة إلى الشعوب التي تعيش على الساحل الغربي لأمريكا. تلك هي الأرض المعروفة بإنتاج الصور الظاهرية للحياة، ومن هذه الأرض نقل حضرة خليفة المسيح خطبة الجمعة أنه يمكن من خلال هذه الأرض أن تتحقق انتصارات الإسلام على الإيديولوجيات الدنيوية.
یہاں رہنے والے ہر احمدی کو اپنی سوچوں کا دھارا اس کے مطابق کرنا ہوگا جو اللہ تعالیٰ کی تقدیر ہے۔ بعض لوگ یہ سوچ رکھتے ہیں اور ان کی سوچ صرف اپنی کم ہمتی کی وجہ سے ہے کہ یہ دنیا دار لوگ ہیں، ان کو دین سے کوئی غرض نہیں۔ یہاں تو دنیا کی سب سے بڑی فلم انڈسٹری ہے، یہاں تو دنیا کی ہاؤ بہت ہے، ٹھیک ہے یہ سب کچھ ہے، لیکن ایک بہت بڑا طبقہ ہمارا انتظار بھی کر رہا ہے، اور جتنا میں سوچتا ہوں میرے دل میں یہ گڑتا جا رہا ہے کہ بعید نہیں کہ امریکہ میں احمدیت کا انقلاب اس علاقے سے ہی آئے۔
كما افتتح أمير المؤمنين في هذه الرحلة مسجد بيت الرحمن في فانكوفر، الذي كان إنجازاً آخر للجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية في زاوية أخرى من العالم.
Today's function is a purely religious event where we are gathered together for the inauguration of our mosque. This is the first purpose-built mosque we have constructed in this province, and so its inauguration is a cause of great joy and happiness for us. the fact that you have all come to share and join in our happiness makes us even more grateful to you than would be the case if you were to attend a regular secular or social function.
तुझे हम दो सना ज़ेबा है प्यार.
من بين آلاف المساجد التي افتتحتها الجماعة هنالك مساجد تحمل أهمية خاصة، وقد افتتح عدد كبير منها في السنوات العشر الماضية، فتمكن العالم من خلال هذه المنارات من رؤية الصورة الحقيقية للإسلام، مما تسبب أن يسحر الناس تلقائيا بجماله. ومن الأمور المميزة جدا في عهد الخلافة الخامسة هو كسب قلوب ذرية معارضي المسيح الموعود عليه السلام، على الرغم من أن أجدادهم قد رفضوا تماما حضرة ميرزا غلام أحمد عليه السلام، ولكن أحفادهم اعترفوا بانتصار حضرته مع الوجود المهيب للزعيم الحالي للجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية حضرة ميرزا مسرور أحمد نصره الله.
In the lifetime of the promised Messiah alayhi salam, there was a priest by the name of John Hugh Smith Pigott. He claimed to be God, and although the locals initially protested against this, but they soon gave up. It was the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, who issued a warning to Pigott that if he persisted in his claims, then he would meet destruction. And Allah the Almighty fulfilled the words of the promised Messiah alayhi salam in this manner, that John Hugh Pigott and his followers have become a thing of the past. Not even a single person associates themselves with the movement of John Hugh Pigott, whereas the Ahmadiyya community is all over the world and it's prospering. And even the granddaughter of John Hugh Pigott, she met Hazur Anwar Allah Ta'ala Bnصره العزيز, and she has cordial relationships with the community.
Until I was 13 years old, I knew nothing about my unusual family history. I find it very strange that members of your community appear to know more about my grandfather than I do, and also members of my family don't know much about it. An old lady who knew him well said to me and my sisters when we were children, and I quote, "Whatever you have heard about beloved, he was a truly kind and loving man. I am sure that he would, if he was still with us, want to spread a message of peace, not war, in these very difficult times we live in. It has been an interesting and a great pleasure to know your community, and I have been honoured to have been given an audience with His Holiness, and I have met other members of the community. I wish the community the very best, especially in their work of spreading the message of peace in the world."
Henry Martin Clark was a Christian missionary who was defeated in a debate with Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the promised Messiah alayhi salam. Despite losing this debate, he insisted that he had won. So the promised Messiah alayhi salam, he prayed fervently to Allah the Almighty, and Allah the Almighty accepted his prayers, and he showed signs in support of the promised Messiah alayhi salam. And from this it became evident that indeed Henry Martin Clark had been defeated in the debate. And since that day and now, Allah has continued to support the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and it has flourished throughout the world, whereas no one even knows the name of Henry Martin Clark. And the great grandson of Henry Martin Clark met with the current head of the Ahmadiyya community, Hazrat Khalifa الخامس أيده الله تعالى بنصره العزيز, and he conceded to the fact that the Ahmadiyya community has prospered, whereas no one knows his great-grandfather.
I am the great-grandson of Henry Martin Clark. He is perhaps infamous in the history of your community. He was known to be an Afghan. In 1897, Henry Martin Clark filed a complaint against Hazur, whom he alleged had plotted to murder him. Hazur behaved impeccably, believing rightly that the truth was above the lies perpetrated towards him. Robert Clark died in 1900. Henry was present at his death. Henry returned to lecture at Edinburgh University on tropical diseases. He died and is buried in the Dean's Cemetery. For a man who had a large influence in India and Scotland, it really is a little sad and lonely. I visited the exhibition in London and also both mosques, but the highlight was an audience with His Holiness. Very difficult to put in words what I felt. A depth of feeling, warmth and understanding I've never felt before. Here was a good man, a great leader, sincerity with humility. I was shaken. I still am. I returned for the peace conference. We spoke again. I had the same feelings as I do now.
لبيك يا حبيب من لبيك سيدي.
الرهبة التي تواجه الناس عند اجتماعهم بخليفة الوقت والحب الذي يتملك قلوب أبناء الجماعة بشكل طبيعي تجاه إمامهم أمر يثبت أن هذا الرجل أكثر من كونه شخص استثنائي. وبنظرة عامة فإن هؤلاء الناس على استعداد للتضحية بحياتهم، ولكنهم في نفس الوقت قد تعلموا من إمامهم مثالا لم يعلمه أي زعيم لجماعته. لقد علمهم السيطرة على عواطفهم، وبدلا من البكاء أمام أي رجل عليهم أن يبكوا أمام الله. هذه هي المحبة والمودة التي تمكن هذه الجماعة من إنشاء علاقة عميقة الجذور مع إمامهم مع إخلاص كامل ومطلق تماما، كما كان المسلمون الأوائل يحبون ويخلصون للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. هذا يثبت بوضوح أن هذه هي الخلافة الحقيقية للنبي الكريم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. وطوال هذا الوقت واصل حضرة خليفة المسيح عادته بلقاء الأحمديين من جميع أنحاء العالم.
It's a relationship which doesn't have any parallel in the modern day world. I am reminded of a Canadian professor, Gulteri, who happened to visit our headquarters at Rabwa and who has been with the Ahmadiyya community and had been interacting with them in Canada and in Pakistan and elsewhere also. He gave a very beautiful simile. He said the relationship of the Khalifa and Jamaat in Ahmadiyya community is they are like the mountain and the valley. You cannot imagine one without the other. So the mutual love for the Khalifa, not only the respect plus the love, deep-rooted love, which emerges out of the conviction, the bonding of the souls gives rise to that kind of love. There is a love between, and Khalifatul Masih also loves the community in the same fashion. And his love is manifested in many ways. As a world leader and a leader of the community which is destined to progress and live for times to come, his attention is on the younger generation. He has his children classes, he has his Waqfin classes, brings people around him, talks to them. The wonderful thing to see is that even the smallest child feels that Khalifatul Masih is accessible to him. Such a high personality is accessible to him, and that very access and the communication between the young generation and the Khalifatul Masih, the spiritual voice, the spiritual life, he is the lifeblood of the community.
My question is that many students pursue the medical field and law field, and you have encouraged a lot of the MDs to pursue research and PhDs. Why is that important for us to do that?
You say there should be some balance. We need doctors, so those who are pursuing medicine, they should do. There are some other fields. There are some students who are interested in languages, they should do it. Archaeology, history, law, there are so many subjects. Why I am emphasizing more on research is this, that in Europe, I don't know much about United States and Canada, but here also the same situation, but in Europe, the local European students are not very much interested in research work, and the number of research workers is reducing there. So this is why I say one thing is to fill the gap, empty students to come up. Why?
Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Sani Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, he stated that a nation cannot be reformed without first reforming its youth. From this we can understand the importance of training the youth of a community for its progress. So this is something which the current head, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih الخامس أيده تعالى بنصره العزيز, has focused his attention towards, and for this reason he is trying to have a better relationship with the youth through these various classes and meetings that he has with these students.
When an Ahmadi girl goes to school wearing a hijab, many people are under the impression that she's being oppressed.
She is depressed?
Yeah.
Achha.
What would be Hazrat Anwar's advice how we...
Oppressed? Achha. So
what would
did
be...
somebody force you to wear hijab?
No.
You can explain. But if you wear hijab and make your face in a way, it all depends on your expression of your face. If it looks depressed, then you are oppressed. Huh? If not, then it's okay. Huh? Be happy, show extra happiness while wearing hijab. Our aim is, our objective is to reform the world. So if not this generation, next generation, we are not going to give up our, this approach.
This is the path.
Yes, we have taken the path, we have been given this path in our teachings in the Holy Quran, and the reformer, the founder of Islam and the founder of Ahmadiyya community.
هذا غيض من فيض ما حققته الجماعة في السنوات العشر الماضية، وعلى كل أحمدي الدعاء لهذا الإنسان الذي تحققت على يده هذه الإنجازات.
We have seen the Khilafat for the last more than 100 years. The blossoming of Khilafat is now what we witness. The message of peace and love and the whole humanity being one is the message which is now reaching out to the world. It is no longer confined to the limits of the small Ahmadiyya community. Now the fragrance of that message is spreading out.
خطت الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية مستنيرة بتوجيهات الخلافة الأحمدية خطوات متقدمة اليوم، وستواصل القيام بذلك في المستقبل أيضا. ومن واجبنا على المستوى الفردي مواكبة هذا التقدم، لأن انتصار هذه الجماعة أمر مقدر من الله تعالى.
और मुस्तकिल है वो शख्स नहीं वो मेरा दिल है वो शख्स नहीं वो मेरा दिल है